All right, greetings everyone. This is a very tired Umbra, but doing the work, bringing you the details about Sephiroth. And tonight, we are going to be doing a little bit of testing on this character. Now, this is the friend unit, and I'm just going to say this. This was thrown together helter-skelter for a couple of reasons. One, I kind of want to see what June can do against this guy. I kind of want to see what his percentages are for certain status effects. In his kit, he has the new Curse status effect, and he also has Berserk. I want to see what those odds are with about a 50% faith and see if it is even worth anything. But before we get into this, currently, I don't have this particularly well overly thought out. Like, I've tried to match up PCs for katanas with some of the stuff that I do have, and I've also tried to just get it generally ready, but it doesn't feel in any sense right now optimal as compared to something that I'm going to be testing later, especially after I see some other people's tests too. So before I get into this video, I just want to make that all clear that I think as of right now that there is going to be more stuff in the future that will be better tested, but it's almost 2 a.m. here, so without further ado, let's just see what happens, shall we? So yeah, we are running Sephiroth. That is the friend unit. We do have him on our own account, but since he is not currently enough, we're not going to really test that one too hard. What we're going to do is essentially set up characters that we already know are particularly pretty powerful. We're going to get their abilities, everything, and then we're just going to see whether or not Sephiroth has any kind of effective ways of dealing with them. We're also going to talk a little bit about what abilities we're casting. And yeah, oh, by the way, look it out. Here he is. He floats. Everything floats down. Okay, sorry. All right, so let's go through his support skills and what each of them is for. And no worries, I see everybody in chat. Thank you for wishing me some goodwill. Please watch all of my videos 3 times just for ad revenue. Thank you so much. All right. All right, jokes, somewhat jokes aside. So this is one of the abilities that we talked about earlier. It's essentially his everything ability. We're going to come back to that in a second because it is essentially a text. But let's start off with this one, which is kind of interesting. Adding a secondary counter to this character when he is hit with specific types of damage. So for 4 turns, when receiving damage from slashing or strike types, gives a reaction that preemptively performs a non-attribute slash attack in a diamond AoE pattern, also increases debuff resistance rate and critical evasion rate, as well as reaction block. So it does a couple of things that is particularly really nice here, given that reactions are really strong on some characters. I think this is pretty good. We're going to check out the next one. This is essentially on his sub job. This is a percentage HP heal. It is just a medium HP heal, nothing terribly special about it, and probably could be chucked into the void, but it is one of his abilities. Next up is his TMR. TMR does cast haste on himself as well as a accuracy increase. Don't have the numbers because Wotv Calc is not updated yet, but it is not seeing greatly increase for accuracy. So it's probably only about 30. I doubt it's a 60 unless there's something weird that I've missed. So let's go back up and talk about this ability, which is the kind of everything for an ability. So talking about this, we're looking at 4 turns, range attack resistance for allies within range around himself, gives an effect to remove basically boosts on characters. Re-raise effect is automatically applied for this character, so he will get re-raise essentially, and then he gets a couple of extra benefits including elemental resistance. So this is the one that I really want to test first, and let's do it. And as you can see, it does have some height difference on it, so that's nice. And we'll also take a look at Sephiroth's stats in battle. As you can see, HP is not incredibly impressive, and attack isn't either, but as I've stated earlier, my VCs When it comes to the VCs that I have equipped, they're not particularly focused on a attacking base. They're more focused on like human killer or whatnot. So we'll see if that actually ends up being enough to make a difference. Whoops, clicked off screen. As you can see, 5% basically across the board for elemental resistance, stronger in ice, weaker in water, as you would expect for a fire character. 37, 26, 23, 18, and 5% just editor or notes. There we go. We have all of that. We have the AP recovery as well. And let's jump back over. Take a quick peek at Sephy. Also, you'll note that he does have a higher than initial starting AP. That is because of his weapon, which that is one of the buffs. He's equipped with that weapon. And now, looks like we are getting a 20% elemental resistance bump from his ability across the board. Also, didn't talk about it earlier, but a little bit of blind resistance, paralyzed resistance, slow resistance, which is interesting to say the least. All right, let's head back. Start casting all our other abilities. Never can quite remember Ferris's for whatever reason. And we'll also have Dario here, just because I'm kind of at least sort of convinced that Dario's katana may end up putting him on a Sephiroth. We'll see. All right, so Joom, if you would, not because height difference. All right, go back, sweetie. Sit down first. Just do some buffs in them. All right, 19 AP per turn as he descends down. Let's take a couple of looks at some of his abilities. First off, I think one of the primary things that everyone's going to be curious about is his limit burst, whether or not it has a capability of doing height difference, whether it is accurate at casting the curse status effect. It does get rid of re-raise, it does do a bunch of stuff, but let's see the big answer here. As you can see, height difference is a little bit. Sephiroth himself has a 67% chance to hit himself with it, and a 98% chance against opponents with high amounts of faith, which is particularly bad news for Uldoa, who is one of the characters who would be incredibly weak to this. Dario also, quickly checking. We have a decent amount of AoE. Decent in the sense that 30% actually. All right, jump on down and test it out against a more formidable crowd. First off, Joom, who does have an actual elemental advantage here, is looking at about a 67% chance of curse coming back here. About 2,000 points of damage, which given the elemental resistance that she has naturally against fire is actually fairly decent, I think. Same here and same here. We can see that Sephiroth's limit burst is doing a fair amount against a pure water-based party, which again, I admit is not fair, but whatever, it's late. And as for Mont himself, but one of the big takeaways that we can get from this immediately is the fact that Curse has a triggering on other characters, whether they have high faith or not. My Mont particularly has 60, other characters are around 50. It's decent chance of Curse being triggered essentially every time. And I would like to state that I don't want undersell how good Curse probably is, because Curse effectively shuts down all healing whatsoever. And if you're also getting rid of re-raise too, that just means that the unit is effectively dead. Sephiroth may end up being more in a support category, but this might just be strong enough that he is effectively on so many teams, since so many modern characters rely on E-Restoral to go long-term fights. All right, let's roll through some other abilities. Now, this ability, I would love to say that I remember all of these, but I am just going to quickly checking. Increase defense penetration for 3 turns. Increase absorbs part of the damage dealt. After removing effect that reduces the wider than AoE attacks. So this ability, I do believe, is one of the ones that we looked at earlier, which is essentially gets through AoEs, gets through some resistances and whatnot. So let's see what the damage looks like here. Higher than his limit burst, so it is actually having an effect on some of the characters, which are generally stronger. Here, this is a character that actually has a barrier, so we're keeping that in mind when we're looking at this. And he's dealing a pretty decent amount of damage to Haunt and so damage to Ferris. But Ferris, for those of you who don't remember, is one of the characters that actually has the ranked up in terms of A. But it's a good test to have here. Oh yes, Sarek, have a good evening. Just and let's take a see if we can't get a peek here. So piercing pretty good through an actual tank like Dario, and I think again good damage. Back down. See our next ability. So this one is one that we haven't seen before, and it's quite interesting. We do have a ability here, which damages the target's medium. It is a sure hit ability, so it actually has accuracy, and reducing a certain percentage of AoE resistance on a big AoEs. Nope, hit the wrong one. Again, things that we can note here: decent enough damage, not getting through barriers, and yeah, seems pretty well on par with looked at. Next one that we want to test, not that one, or one of his subs. This one. So this is an ability that has Berserk, and as you can see here, we see more of the actual status effect. In 0% against Doom and a 27% chance. So it does mean that Curse is effectively inflated on his limit burst and has a much higher chance of triggering. Curious what the accessory from the FF7 Advent Children event will also have as an effect for Sephiroth, whether it will boost his status effect capability or just his damage, which seems far more likely as it is the one thing that seems missing from his kit. Again, we are going to water. So let's take a look at the last two abilities. This one is just a basic deals damage and absorbs part of the, or absorbs the damage dealt. As you can see, damage looks like that. And last but not least, this one is pretty interesting as well. As if before I speak and say it wrong, after reducing a certain percentage of target's slash resistance for 3 turns, deal 3 consecutive damage. So it is a chaining ability. It has pretty wide range of application. It doesn't select 2 targets, which is a little surprising because I feel like it could have had that not so strong, but it is slash shred, which is something that as far as I can remember, we haven't seen this on any other character. So if a character who is one of the characters out there who has a ton of slash resistance, he can get through it quite a bit and enable other slashers. That might be just valuable enough, considering that a lot of characters talk slash resistance, or at least some of the newer. So let's head back. Let's turn down a little bit. We can test out and see if we can't get that curse status effect trigger. Ow. This is the most peaceful music for the wrong kind of limit burst. As you can see, Joom's limit burst, Joom's counter actually did trigger first. The other support skill had been triggered, maybe would have been a little bit better. I'm not super familiar with Max Knight, so I don't know how good it is, but now let's do the proof is in the pudding and try and restore some HP. Now, Joom is another character whose one of the ones that Sephiroth is going to be particularly teaming up with, but more than often than not, going to be fighting. So let's take some interesting ones here. See what that limit burst is going to do. Not a kill, which is interesting because June does have elemental advantage here, but isn't quite getting far enough to actually kill Sephiroth despite the elemental advantage and the fact he is stacking a huge amount of attack compared to Sephiroth. That's kind of interesting. So, there we go. There's a little bit more damage than we kind of expect. But as you can see, June does have a pretty big elemental advantage here. So we're peak here. But one thing I do want to test real quick. So June's effect should still be active if I'm correct. And as you can see, even their secondary abilities that are not directly related to as healing are completely shut down by the curse status effect. So that means things such as support skill tanks who, when their HP triggers below 50%, that means that they do not get their HP heal. It does mean in my eyes, especially with how the kind of landscape is with characters, that Sephiroth's damage and DPS maybe doesn't need to necessarily be as high as some people want it to be, since he is effectively shutting down most of every unit's healing capabilities, meaning that battles aren't going to be as long. But Sephiroth still does support a good amount of defense. Let's jump ahead really quickly here. Test this. Interestingly, pretty resilient against full target attacks. If we can just here first. Still decent even against piercing. That's cool. Now let's try out this character. Who's a character that I think that a lot of global excited for. Let's see some details about him. First off, that limit burst of Guarmont is still hitting. I would like to also reiterate 40 reincarnations does do a lot. Right, just a few other abilities. Alright, I would say some decent damage, but let's see if we can't trigger some. I do believe his effect, I did activate the effect, so we should see it trigger skipping through. Get that secondary. Oh, maybe I didn't. Interesting. Alright, well, we've proven that healing is effectively down, so let's get over to Sephiroth quickly. And just test out one of his other abilities. Now, one of the key things too is to remember that one of his attacks, when properly buffed, even if it is essentially a general dispel across units as well, which is pretty powerful. It does put Sephiroth in a little bit more of a awkward role as dealing damage, as one thing that we've certainly shown is that he has no way of getting through barriers, which means we'll partner this guy up with some kind of barrier to destroyer to make sure that he is still getting through. But yeah, so not that one. Right. Or should we, you know what? We'll try this. The actual AoE shred. Mont does have an actual chance, but let's see what happens. I want to show 25%. Let's test. Get those 3 hits. 0 healing. Now if we go over and check it out, down to 16%. So yeah, pretty much what I would expect for it. But it's interesting how Sephiroth actually has shaped out as a unit. It would take a little bit more time and thought to figure out whether or not I like his subs. Currently, I think his general HP skill is probably overrated, but we could test that out really quickly before we end this video. Add a whole bunch of turns. And test and see. 4,487. Pretty decent. And if you stack more HP on him, Trust Mastery Runes too might be generally good enough. Curious to see how it upscaling, but should be good. I'll give you despair. Alright, so I think we are probably good to talk about this. So Sephiroth is missing some key things that you would expect from a regular attack, but at the same time his kit is loaded with everything else. And if you think about just where he's probably end up with either June or Ashen, some combo team, possibly with Wind, possibly with just other katanas, it's hard to say right now, but it's hard also to deny just how powerful and how generally well made the character is. I think that he probably will be classified a little bit more as a not a primary DPS character, but a little bit more of a supporter with a ton of abilities that can turn a tide of battle, especially in IT matches. Anyway, that's at least an initial first look at his. I would like to talk more about it, but this video's already gone long enough, so please look forward when I do a full data review later on about everything and all the numbers once we have them, and update my opinions throughout the week about how good this character is and talk about team building, as right now, yes, the most obvious lazy answer will be, hey, throw him with Cloud, throw him with Doom, throw him with Ash and Mont, and win. But I think we're going to need to delve a little bit deeper into this character, especially once we see what his VC looks like. So, thanks for watching. Later.